Hi everyone, welcome to our S6 ethics class. Today I would like to talk about a few things with you. Remember that we've been talking about political philosophy as well as in particular democracy. And last time we talked about several tensions in democracy. Now, I want to first take a look back at what Plato and Socrates say about democracy. You already know that they're quite critical of it, they were against it. But then also, I want to present to you another take on democracy, a more contemporary one. So, we're going to discuss briefly a text written by Amy Gutman and Dennis Thompson. They talk about what is called deliberative democracy. Like I said, it's a contemporary text, and some of you might be happy to know that Amy Gutman is a woman philosopher in the States, and she's also, if I'm not mistaken, the president. I'm not sure if she's still the president of the University of Pennsylvania. So that's a big thing. You don't see that often. Lastly, because I'm giving you homework related on this topic, on the topic of democracy and these particular texts, we'll spend some time explaining the homework. Okay. So now we start with Plato and Socrates. Just to recap, we already talked about the ship of fools, this image or this metaphor that Plato gives us in a part of the Republic. So it's his depiction of what democracy is like. Okay, and at the same time, as he describes his understanding of democracy as a ship of fools, he at the same time criticizes it. So you can see this is a rather older, seems like a woodcut rendition of the ship of fools, and then you have this more contemporary one. And I suppose this is seems to be critical of democratic figures in the U.S. So I suppose this is more of a kind of critique from a Republican point of view. Okay, you have Obama there, Michael Moore, the documentary filmmaker. That's Bernie Sanders, Nancy Pelosi, etc., and other people. Now, if you remember, we took a look at this excerpt from the Republic. Plato describes a ship full of sailors who are fighting against one another, and they're fighting over who has the right, who's supposed to man the ship, who's supposed to do the steering. Okay, and they have different opinions, and some say it has to be me or that other guy, so they cannot agree. Even if there's a captain who's a little deaf and has some problems with regard to his eyesight. Okay, and not very knowledgeable. So in this situation, you can understand if there's no authority figure, and then they fight over the right to steer the ship. And Plato goes further and he says, you know, if if you are somebody who can please the crowd, if you are somebody who helps the crowd, this bunch of sailors, so that they can take control of the ship, then they will call you a true sailor, a pilot, a very capable seaman. But they have no idea of what it really means to be a good pilot, a good sailor. Okay, and Plato tells us if you are to be a good pilot, you have to have a knowledge of the year, pay attention to the year and the seasons. You should be able to read the sky and the stars and the winds, and you should be able to steer regardless of whether people like it or not. It doesn't depend on their likes or dislikes. It doesn't depend on their desires. Being a good pilot, Plato suggests, is all about having the right capacities, having the right knowledge. Okay. So in summary, remember that we talked about the two main questions in political philosophy. You know, who should rule, who should have power, and the second one is says who, what justifies that, what justifies your claim. Okay. Now imagine Plato answers these two questions, and Plato would say no, not just anyone. You know, a democratic answer would be we all have the equal right to vote or to exercise power. Okay, nobody's better than anyone else. Everyone, anyone can be a ruler. But Plato, on the other hand, would say no, that's not true. That cannot be the case. And he puts forward the idea that only philosopher kings have would have the right to rule in the republic. He partly relies on what in another part of the republic is called the myth of metals. He says that some people are born with gold, some people are born with silver, others with bronze, and naturally those who are born with gold in them, they're naturally superior, and therefore, given the right training, they go on to become, the true leaders of the republic, philosopher kings. Okay, and Plato is quite strict about this. He says that, all these people who are potentially to become rulers of the republic, they should live in common. They shouldn't have private property. They shouldn't have their own families. You know, they train together, they live together, an austere life, and they spend years, decades being trained to become good rulers. Actually, Plato is relying on what is called the craft analogy. So, what does that mean? That means that those people who have the right to rule in the republic, they are the people who are knowledgeable about a certain craft. Just as making a basket is a craft and requires knowledge, making pottery, for instance, is a craft and requires knowledge and expertise. So is ruling the state. That's why we call it statecraft. You know, uh, true rulers, good rulers, they're the rulers. They're the ones who have the right knowledge, who have the right expertise. So it's really a combination of two things. Plato would say only philosopher kings have the right to rule because they are inherently superior. They have the inherent capacity. They're born with gold in them. So remember the myth of metals. But on the other hand, he also insists in the Republic on training, lifelong training to become a ruler. So only those with enough expertise who've received the right training, you know, could or have the right to rule. Okay? So you can understand that Plato and Socrates, by extension, were totally anti-democratic. Not if you're talking about the right to rule, it shouldn't be just anyone. It should be those people who have the inherent capacity and who have who have had the right training. You can appreciate the difference between Plato and Socrates' position and that of more democratic leaning people. We've seen this before. Democracy, etymologically speaking, comes from two words. So this means democracy actually means the rule of the demos, the rule of the people, of the masses. Okay. From Plato's point of view, the masses, they're the crowd, they're the mob, the unthinking mob, those who are the many. Okay. You see, an argument like this would agree with Plato's. If you were sick, you wouldn't, and you're looking for a cure to your illness, you wouldn't put, you know, the answer to your question as to how you're supposed to get cured to a vote. You won't put that to a vote to a bunch of people who have no medical training. And the same way, when you're talking about ruling the state, you wouldn't just put anyone in a position of authority. You would want somebody with the right training and the right expertise, enough knowledge about statecraft, about how to rule a state, the different the different kinds of states, politics and political philosophy. Somebody has knowledge about these things. That's the person you would want to be in that position of power. So guardianship is a skill. I mean, ruling is a skill. It's based on knowledge. And the fact of the matter is, according to Plato and Socrates, not everyone has that skill. Not everyone has that knowledge. Okay. I hope this is clear. In the next recording, I'm going to give a summary of Amy Gutman's and Dennis Thompson's text, Deliberative Democracy.